Episode of Time for Tea with R. Marie. And so I'm excited to be here. Hopefully, you guys are on with me. Let me just check here to make sure I'm live where I need to be. Let's see here. Let's see. Gonna get started in just a moment here. I just want to make sure I'm on. So it looks like I am. So I'm excited. Like I said, for episode 2, I'm just going to pause the timer for just a moment there. I'm actually going to start it over, then pause it. Hopefully, some of you are able to join me. And so there is a lot going on, you guys. So I hope that everyone is doing okay out there, staying safe. Hi, Tanika. Thank you for joining. I'm glad you're here. So as I was saying, hopefully you guys are staying safe through this pandemic. And so I want to talk to you all tonight about how our culture has us ill prepared for this pandemic. And so I'm going to get into that for just a moment. But if you're watching, if you could share this video out, invite friends to join on this video. You can see the video live on my Facebook page, Hope with R. Marie, as well as Instagram, Hope with R. Marie, and also YouTube. The live video will also be posted to YouTube as well. So for those of you who can't join us live, you can definitely catch the replay. So I am R. Marie, your ambassador of hope. I am also your proud joy restoration coach. And during these times, we all can use more joy. And so what I do is I help women who have experienced loss, trauma, or heartache. I help them to restore their joy. And so that is so important during these times. But also the purpose of doing Time for Tea with R. Marie every Thursday is to inspire hope. And we need hope during this time. We definitely need it. If you are watching the news at all, you see people globally are panicking, people are experiencing anxiety, people are afraid, people are uncertain. So there's a lot of different emotions that are tied to what we are seeing. There also obviously is illness. For myself, just this past week, I've had 3 texts from different people of someone close to them being hit with the coronavirus. One person in particular has passed away from the coronavirus. And so this is a very serious pandemic, something that I don't take lightly. It's also something that I have tried not to focus on so much on my page, just because, again, my goal is to inspire hope. So I think that you guys get a lot of the news. You probably hear a lot of rumors from friends. You're probably getting updates from the CDC. So information is coming to us from so many different people. And so it is important that we not lose focus, that we cling to hope, and that we do things that bring us joy. So we're going to go ahead and get into our topic. Again, if you're here, I would love to hear from you. Tell me where you're tuning in from. And also, don't forget to share this video out. So we're going to get right into it. And so you're probably wondering, what do I mean by how has culture ill prepared us? And so I'm going to just get right into it, because when I say this statement, if you belong to the same culture that I belong to, I think you're going to get this the very first time. Okay. All right. So here it is. And so we have all heard, what happens in the house stays in the house. If you've heard that, let me know that you've heard that. So I think if you are African American, you have heard that term, whether you have heard it used within your own family, or if you have used it with your children, or you have just heard it from other families. But it's definitely a familiar term across our culture. And so, what does that have to do with our current pandemic? A lot of times, what happens when things are happening globally is that people, as I said at the very beginning, start to experience symptoms of really grief. And so, when you're experiencing the anxiety, when you're experiencing the depression, when you're experiencing the loss of a job, I was shocked to find, even just because of this pandemic, the divorce rates have even gone up. So many things are being affected by this pandemic. Thank you, Trinity. Thank you for joining in. Yes, you've definitely heard that. And so it's something that we've all heard. And so with this pandemic, what happens most times, we hear that phrase as children. And as children, most times the purpose behind that phrase is our parents are telling us, don't let anybody else in our business. Don't let anybody else know what's going on in our home. Or it may be not even necessarily a bad thing. I mean, obviously, there are some bad things that happen in communities, and some of those may be sexual molestation or rape or incest. And so those are definitely some things that a lot of times within our community specifically has not been discussed. Good evening, Gretchen. Thank you for joining. So some of those things have not been discussed. And so what happens, that type of phrase sticks with us, and we grow into adults that have a hard time speaking our truth. And what that phrase does is it not only tells us that we don't want anyone else to know our business, but it also may cause shame or place shame on our truth. And so what it does is it causes us to not really be honest and forthright about our truth. And so that is a very something that's a myth that I have tried to debunk so much, because it really just shatters our people. I mean, it really is a silent killer for our people. And so I'm going to go through just some thoughts that I jotted down here. So if you see me kind of looking off to the side, I'm referring to my notes, but definitely I want you guys to continue to join in. And let me just make sure I have my comments here so that I can see. So if you have questions, obviously I want you to join in the conversation, okay? So this is not just about you hearing from me. I would love to hear from you as well. And so one of the first things that I want to talk about is how this pandemic relates to grief. And so I just pretty much said that in a nutshell a few moments ago, that what is going on globally can cause grief. It can cause anxiety. It can cause physical illness. And so, with the coronavirus, one of the things that we've heard most frequently is that if you have a compromised immune system, you really need to beware of this virus. Well, anxiety and depression and worry and panic can also, and it's proven that it can weaken your immune system. And so when we think about that in terms of the connection with grief and the current pandemic that we're experiencing. So something that I want you to think about is that people that are experiencing grief are not broken people. It's a lot of times it may feel like you are broken, but you are not broken because you are experiencing grief. What you are is you are unfamiliar with what you are experiencing. Oftentimes, you don't know how to continue living without the person that you lost. Or if it's the case of a divorce, you don't know how to continue living without your partner. You don't know how to continue living without that job that you've been on for years. So you are unfamiliar with this territory that you are embarking upon. The second thing is that you are also ill prepared. A lot of times we don't know how to experience grief. And as a result of that, we don't know how to heal from grief. And so that is a connection that I want you to take note of. And so let's take it back to what I was talking about at the beginning with how our culture has ill prepared us. And so going back to that phrase, what happens in this house stays in the house. What that does again is it brings shame to the person that wants to speak their truth. In the Christian community, even oftentimes people experience shame just from wanting to speak their truth. And this is how you would know that this occurs. So, say for example, someone tells their testimony about things they have experienced, whether that is fornication, whether that is an abortion, whether that is adultery, whatever the case may be. Oftentimes, when they have gotten to the point that they are free from whatever it is that they've experienced and they want to help other people and now share their truth, oftentimes the Christian community frowns upon this. People start to question, why are you now sharing this? People start to question, why are you putting your family in jeopardy for sharing this? And so, and I don't condone necessarily that you are sharing someone else's story without their permission. That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I am saying is that you have to be free enough to share your truth. And that statement of what happens in the house stays in the house often limits us from being able to share our truth. It is okay to admit during this pandemic that you may not be okay, that you may have lost a job, that now that you're staying home day in and out with your spouse, that may have caused some problems or have highlighted some problems that were already there. And so it is okay to say that I am not okay. I am being affected by this. I am worried about a family member that has a compromised immune system. I am worried about a friend that is in the healthcare system that is still going to work day in and day out. It is okay to share those experiences. And so the translation again of what happens in the house stays in the house really is, I don't want anyone else to know my business. It also is, we're not really going to acknowledge it and talk about it. When that is being said, oftentimes that conversation is never brought back to light. That molestation, that abuse, that illness, whatever it may be, that mental illness is often not brought to light. And that person who that statement is made to is left to struggle alone. And so I also wanted to highlight what speaking your truth does. Speaking your truth helps you to release the burden. That is one of the first signs or the first steps towards healing, is that you're able to acknowledge that you're hurting and you're able to acknowledge that there is a burden. And so once you're able to do that, oftentimes when people are wrong and they're just, afraid of, and not even necessarily afraid, that's not the word I'm looking for, but when they are backed into a corner and they are having to speak their truth because they've got caught doing something wrong, oftentimes you see that they are relieved from not having to no longer live the lie. And so just being able to speak your truth causes release. It causes relief. You are able to be relieved from your burden, but it also gives you the opportunity to build a support system for yourself. It gives you the opportunity to no longer struggle alone. It gives you the opportunity to welcome being loved by someone else. And so a lot of times we feel like we're in isolation. We feel like we're alone. We feel like no one else is concerned. We feel like no one else cares to listen to whatever it is that we may be experiencing. But most oftentimes it's really the fact that you have not shared what it is that is on your heart and allowed someone else to come in and love you and support you and to be with you as you journey towards healing. And so that is really the truth. And so when we think about how we're ill prepared when it comes to this pandemic, I mean, we can think about financially. I was talking to a girlfriend earlier today, and she mentioned how when we are, oh, I'm so glad you're here, Bree. Thank you for joining. But she mentioned that, one of the financial ways that we're ill prepared for this pandemic is, we have families that are just in stress and being anxious about having to homeschool their children. And as a result of that, a lot of families have had to go out and purchase laptops to homeschool their children and so that they can participate in distance learning. And she just made the statement of, one of the ways that we are ill prepared as a culture is that we don't have those things already in place for our children. But if you look at some of our children's closets, you may see the latest Jordans. You may see that they even have the latest iPhone, but they are not prepared to learn educationally or to be prepared academically via distance. And so that is just one of the ways that we are ill prepared. But most definitely when it comes to mentally, how do we prepare for something that everyone around us may be experiencing, but in a different way? How do we prepare for that? And so, one of the first things to do is just to be honest about how that phrase does us more harm than good. It is not good to just let whatever happens in the house stay in the house. We have to tell. That is why there are so many prominent issues within the Black community, especially. Now, does this mean that no other community tells their children sometimes, don't tell what's going on? If someone asks, don't tell, don't share. That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I'm talking about is what I am most familiar with, which is my culture. And I know that that is something that happens. Oh my gosh, y'all, I forgot to set my timer. I forgot to reset the timer. I just realized that. So it's 7:17. So if I keep talking and I go over 7:30, somebody please just let me know. But thank you, Bree, for agreeing with that, because it is so important that we are prepared, but also that we realize how our culture has ill prepared us for this pandemic that is going on. And so let's get back to how that happens. And so often, as I said, when someone is sharing, that person is made to feel shame, for one, for even needing help from someone else. I had someone tell me not too long ago that they have become accustomed to being rebuked, if you will, for even asking for help. And so that is an issue. And so, because what that also can form in us is pride. It can also form, like we have, thank you so much, Gretchen. It can also form in us the need to appear that we always have it together. And that is not true for any of us. No one always has it together. And so sometimes it is okay to admit that I'm afraid that my job is going to cut my hours. I'm afraid that I may lose my job, or that I've already lost my job and I need help if you know of any job openings. Those are all natural conversations that should be able to take place. But again, when it's ingrained in our brain that we are not supposed to share when we need help, we're not supposed to acknowledge that we need help, we're not supposed to share, especially to people outside of our families, that becomes an issue, because there are people outside of people that love us, like our immediate families, that can help us, and that God may have assigned to us in this season that they can help us. And so kids grow to be adults who really cannot discern what I should share and what I shouldn't. What they've done is have that phrase ingrained in their brain, and they have decided, even as an adult, that I'm just not going to share anything. I'm not going to share when I'm affected by something, because what I saw growing up is my parent never shared that with me. She seemed to be okay, and she seemed to, whatever the case may be, she still seemed to be living her life. And so we don't know, though, the pain that that person may be carrying, that is a silent killer. There are so many people, and I'm so excited for next week's episode. I'm going to have a guest on, and she's going to be sharing her story. And ladies, and even some gentlemen, if you're watching, you do not want to miss next week. I'm just going to throw that plug in there, because this is someone that's going to be sharing their truth about exactly what I'm talking about, how stress literally almost took her life. And so you do not want to miss next week. But because of this pandemic, it is causing stress everywhere. And if you don't know what to do with that stress and how to relieve yourself from that stress, because you are so concerned about what other people may think about you, what your family may think, then you are going to continue to struggle alone. And that is the sad part, that I am trying to help you so that that's something that does not have to be the case. You do not have to struggle alone. There are people out there that are trained, that are willing to help you. and that are there for that purpose. And so you do not have to do that. And so when we think even in terms of the Black community, just dating back even historically, we've all heard the term that, we have skeletons in the closet. And honestly, some of those skeletons by now probably have turned into fossils, because some of that stuff is just so deep that no one, and so well buried that no one can even recover from it. You have situations where families, there's an elephant in the room that no one is addressing. And you see now, which I'm so happy to see, you see more and more of African American men and African American women that are speaking their truth. And a lot of times they get the most flack from people within our own communities. And so, again, there is a time and a place for it. I'm not saying that you have to share absolutely everything that you experience, but there are some things that in order for you to get help from, thank you, Gretchen, in order for you to get help through, you need to share it with someone else, even if just to vent, even if just to bounce your idea off of someone else, even if just to see if you are wrong in the situation. Sometimes we need to invite other people into what it is that we are experiencing. I've seen, and so many people have sent me messages on Facebook of nurses that are, one nurse I saw particularly today that was just crying and just saying that this has just become such a heavy load for her, just dealing with this pandemic, and how, people's families can't be with them as they are taking their last breath, and how she is the last person with them oftentimes as they are taking their last breath. And so just imagine if we are in that situation, and there are so many things that we have not shared with people that are most closest to us, things that they will never get to know, that we have never shared, that we have kept, that we know that we should have shared. Maybe we didn't know how to share. And so, again, we want to debunk that myth that that is our truth, that that is how things should be handled. And even if you think about movies that have been popular, one that comes to mind is Antoine Fisher, is a movie that when I saw that movie, I probably cried through the entire movie, because it was just that sad to see a male be abused in that way. And especially our men, and a lot of our men have been abused and even sexually abused. But again, because it is not discussed, because it is looked upon, frowned upon rather, people are not discussing it, and people are hurting. And so what does that do when things like this occur, like this pandemic? It only adds to our issues. It only highlights issues that were already there. So again, I'm saying all of this to say, free yourself. Get someone that you trust that you can talk to. Get yourself a counselor, get yourself a coach, a joy restoration coach. That's a shameless plug there. But get yourself someone that will listen to you, that won't have a biased opinion, that will be non judgmental, but that can help you. Because a lot of times, those family members that we may be reaching out to, they don't want to help you because they may dig up, that may dig up their own history. That may dig up their own history. And so it's uncomfortable. So they would rather just not discuss it at all. And so thank you, Gretchen. You're doing great with keeping me on time. I appreciate that. So I have about 6 more minutes. And so I want you to think about this. And this is not my words, but I got this from an article. And I want to hear if you guys actually agree with this. But one of the things it said is that Black families or communities hold 3 things dear. And those 3 things are food. Hello. Food. We love our Sunday dinners, and we really bond with each other over a good meal. Another thing that we hold dear is loyalty to one another. We have a strong bond with one another. And then obviously the third thing is religion. And those are 3 things that a lot of our Black families hold dear to their hearts, and that's what their communities thrive off of. But one of the things that our community does not thrive off is Honesty. Being honest. We can be at a Sunday dinner and there's an elephant in the room and no one is addressing it. We could be at church and there's an elephant in the room and no one is addressing it. And so, although we have some great things in place and we love to fellowship with each other, we love to encourage each other, we love to have, dinner together, and we love to participate in serving God together, we don't forsake that assembly. A lot of times, what we do forsake is being honest. We have masks on that we wear when we are around different people. When we're around people in our church or we're around people in our family, maybe a different mask when we're around different friends. And so the point of this entire episode today is become comfortable with speaking your truth. And maybe for you, that may just look like at first starting a journal. It may look like just getting your own feelings out there until you're comfortable enough to invite someone else in. And then it may also look like being prayerful about who can I speak my truth to? Because we do have to use wisdom and we do have to test character to see if that person, one, can take my truth that I'm sharing with them, and to see that, hi, Stephanie, I'm glad you're here. But to see that that person can take my truth, to see if that person has the ability to hold my truth in confidence. And so it is important that we start taking steps toward being honest. Find someone that you can bleed to. Find someone that you can be honest with. And if you don't have that person in your inner circle, then perhaps seek a counselor, seek a coach, seek someone that can help you. Because life is not meant to do alone. It is not meant, there are going to be struggles, there are going to be anxieties, there are going to be things we experience. I shared a little bit of my story last week. There are going to be things that we experience that will knock us truly off our feet, and we need someone else. That is the first way that the enemy tries to attack us, is through isolation. The enemy tries to attack us through isolation. If he can get me to say, I'm not sharing what I'm going through, and you know what, even we can become isolated in our prayers. Hey, Dreas. Hey, sis, I'm glad you're here. We can become isolated in our prayers. You know, our prayers, we can be dishonest in our prayers. We can mask ourselves in our prayers and not even tell God our truth when he created us. When he knows that we're hurting, he knows the real motive behind why we do things. But so we can't be honest in our prayers if we're not able to speak our truth. You can't pray and expect God to move on your behalf when you're not completely honest with him. So I have about a minute left. I promise that I want to be respectful of your time. I hope that this was helpful. If you guys who are watching, if you could do me a favor and just share this out, I would greatly appreciate that. Thank you, Gretchen, again for keeping me where I need to be with time. So I appreciate that. I forgot to set my timer again. So, but I hope that this was helpful for you. Again, you do not want to miss next week. Next week, I will have a guest on who literally almost lost her life. I don't want to give too much of the story, so you're just going to have to be here. But when I say literally almost lost her life, she literally almost lost her life because she kept everything right here. And she kept moving and trying to please people, trying to keep people happy in her life. And she almost lost her life as a result. So thank you so much. I'm glad that you enjoyed this, Stephanie. I would greatly appreciate it if you will share this out for me. And I hope that everyone that's here will tune in next week. So until next time, I will see you guys. Stay safe out there. Follow your social distance. Stay at home. Do everything that you need to do to be safe. And until next Thursday, I'll see you again. Have a good night. Love you too, Gretchen.